Welcome to Ask the Latina. I'm your host, Terry Beltran. This program is about the opportunity to ask and learn from a Latina trailblazer, with the mission to inspire and motivate Latinas to enter a career where we just do not have enough representation. For more resources, visit our website, askthelatina.com. Welcome to Ask the Latina. My guest today is Ana Lujan. It's very exciting for me because I know you're going to enjoy this. She's going to touch on where she is today as a business manager, but also her background in health. And medicine is one of the things that we definitely want Latinas to consider in high school for a career to go to, because we need you. So thank you, Ana, for joining me today.
Thank you, Terry, for having me on. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, let's start with where you were born, your heritage, and growing up. And at what point were you interested in going into healthcare, or actually medicine?
Yeah. So I was born in Guanajuato, Mexico, and I lived there for a couple of years. And then I moved to Chihuahua, Mexico. I did kindergarten there, and I moved to the US when I was in first grade. I moved to Phoenix, and that's really where I grew up. I lived there for about 30 years. And I currently live in El Paso, Texas, and I've been here for about 2.5 years.
Oh, okay. And let's see, what did you decide to go to college, and where did you go, and what was the transition like for you?
Yeah, so I have kind of an interesting story about my college experience. So, school is something that I always really enjoyed. I just loved learning about new things. I loved doing homework. And so I was kind of like an overachiever in school and did all kinds of extracurriculars and got really good grades. So I wound up actually going to Harvard out of high school. And so it was a big transition going from Phoenix to Cambridge when I had never really been away from home. And so I experienced a lot of difficulties there. I just couldn't really find my place. I was really alone. I think for us as Hispanics and Latinas, sometimes it's hard to imagine being so far away and maybe your family isn't quite as supportive. And so I did experience um, some negativity there, and also from my peers saying things like, you only got into Harvard because you were Mexican or something like that, kind of saying that you were like the diversity applicant. That's why you got in. And so I was actually only there for a few months before I decided to come back home. And I wound up going to school at Arizona State University. And I actually really enjoyed my time there. I decided to study nursing. And at that time, I decided to study nursing, I think because I always grew up with kind of the idea of, when you come from an immigrant background, sometimes you have like a limited set of options, right, that your parents have in their mind for you, or that you are talked to about when you're little. So for me, it was being a doctor. That was my goal, and I think after the experience at Harvard, I maybe doubted myself and my capabilities, and so I remember thinking, well, I'll study nursing, and worst case, if I can't get into medical school, then I'll still be a nurse, and so I'll still be in healthcare. And so that's how I decided to choose that major, and I'm really glad I did. I did, still try to go to medical school and kind of finish all the prerequisites and such, but at the same time, I was starting my family. I actually got married when I was 19 to my husband. We've been married for like 13 years now. And so I think life just evolved in a way that it was clear to me that medical school wasn't going to be my path, but I wind up finding this great path still in healthcare as an MBA, kind of working in business.
Oh, that's great. So did you ever get a chance to use your registered nurse degree in that field?
Yes, I actually worked at Phoenix Children's Hospital. I was a pediatric CVICU nurse for 2 years coming out of college, and so I got to say that those were the most rewarding, but also draining, as you can imagine, physically, mentally, emotionally. That was it was the most intense and rewarding part of my career, and so I really enjoyed the 2 years that I spent there. I then moved over to working outpatient. So I worked with the same population of kids, only I was able to see them thriving, outside of the ICU setting. So that was really nice, kind of contrast to what I had experienced before.
Yeah, I think as a registered nurse, my mom was a registered nurse. You get an opportunity to move around in different areas, and you really have a chance to find where you really feel more that's your area of expertise. And that's a nice thing about that field. You have a lot of options. I think even today there's traveling nurses and everything like that, right?
Yes, it's such a great career. And I think, especially for somebody who maybe doesn't have a wide network of people in their family or in their social circles to explain what kind of opportunities might be available, to you, just starting. And something that I know that was interesting for me in being a nurse opened up an entire world of opportunities once I was actually in my career to say, wow, I could really go in so many directions from here. And I think that was part of the difficulty transitioning is like, what is my long term plan going to be? It's an overwhelming kind of array of opportunities.
That's great. So from there, what other opportunities opened up for you after being a registered nurse?
So, I had kind of always worked in the cardiovascular space as a nurse. So I worked, first in ICU and then in outpatient, again with cardiac population. And I kind of knew that I was ready for something different. So I started just researching different job opportunities that had like nurse in cardiology in the title. And
Mm.
I came across this opportunity for a database program manager at a local hospital. And it was all about cardiac registries. And so registries are data sets that professional societies stand up, and they collect data on certain types of cardiovascular patients. And so, as a nurse, your knowledge comes in the fact that you're reviewing all of these charts, abstracting all of these data points, putting them into this registry, and then the professional societies can make decisions on best paths of care based on the data that you're helping input into these databases.
That's great. Plus, you probably have that experience of actually working with patients that someone who's just all technical would not have. So you have a lot more to put into that project.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Actually, there's some really interesting like technology work in the works in terms of artificial intelligence and natural language processing, because as you can imagine, medical records are very unstructured. So it's a lot of just free text medical notes, and so for a program to be able to translate all of that cleanly into a data set, it's really difficult, right? So you need people with that rich clinical knowledge to translate all of that free text and really extract the meaning behind it, not just the words, and put it in correctly into a database.
I imagine it's even more challenging with families that are as Spanish preferred language families. Do you come across anything like that?
All the charts are in English because it's from an English, healthcare system. But there were definitely periods when I was reviewing charts, and maybe the medical history wasn't complete because maybe there could have been an interpretation, barrier there at the hospital. But I definitely came across that when I was a bedside nurse, and I actually would request to be assigned to patients who had primarily Spanish-speaking families because I just saw the impact that it made, where they immediately felt at ease when I came in the room and said "Buenos dias," and so they knew that they could communicate with me instead of feeling kind of separate from the care team.
Yeah, there's that nervousness that goes away when they see you and just I don't know, it's almost like, I've been there and both from my mom being a nurse and doing it for the hospital as well with a couple doctors, one from Argentina, one from Mexico, that they would go and speak Spanish or go to the Spanish speaking families and help them because after hours they would do that. But then when she became a patient, I remember it was quite different when we finally got when we got a doctor that was from Panama, and this the whole mannerism of how um, respect and all that, and the way he spoke to her. I saw that so vividly different from the other doctors.
Yes,
It was
exactly.
interesting. Yeah. Okay, so tell us about, I think you got your MBA too, right?
Yes, I did. I actually went to Grand Canyon University and got my MBA while being a full time mom and having a full time job. So definitely was kind of an after hours intense couple of years, but I was really happy to get my MBA. I feel like I learned a lot. It gave me a great foundation for, again, opening more doors. At that time, I was transitioning from more of a clinical role in my company to more of a business role in
Mhm.
sales in those sorts of business functions. And so I think the MBA really gave me that kind of worldview to understand what I was doing within my role at work.
Right. And then the company you're working for now is in the health area?
Yes, the company's called League, and it's a health tech company. It's doing really exciting things for healthcare. Prior to working here, I worked at a telehealth company. So I've been kind of on this journey of following technology and the way that technology is interacting with healthcare and making patients' lives easier. And so, from my telehealth experience, now what we're working on is facilitating patient interactions with the healthcare system, kind of unifying all the different point solutions that are out there from, you know, it could be like social determinants of health, for example. If
Mm,
somebody's having a hard time getting to their appointments because they don't have transportation and their
mm,
health insurer, for example, has 10 to 15 different resources for this patient, instead of the patient having to track all that information on all different websites, the patient could have everything on one app and access all of the relevant resources that they have from either their health insurer or their health system all in one app. So, decreasing the barriers to accessing care.
oh, that's really good. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Sounds pretty exciting. So you went from, you're actually now like in health tech, which is a really important thing. And it looks like everything you've done in your journey really has taken you to 2 areas that it seems like you're passionate about. So that's pretty exciting. And when you were going through this, I mean, let's say if you went back to when you were in high school, what advice would you give yourself, if high school or even college, either one, looking back at all your journey now?
Yeah, I think my advice would be to not worry so much about what's going to happen. I think I've learned there's a lot of anxiety, I think, that can occur when you have maybe you feel that burden of being the first generation growing up here, right? Like your parents
Mhm.
sacrificed a lot and you want to make all of that meaningful. You want to ensure that their sacrifices that you honor their sacrifices by doing, well in your career. And so I think I worried a lot about, am I going to do it right? Am I going to make it? And um, I think I would tell myself to just focus on what I like doing, and that natural development will happen, and to just follow my interests and kind of leave the worry to the side.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's awesome that you had the chance to go to Harvard. I think right now affirmative action is on the block, unfortunately. Hopefully, it's continues because it does give opportunities. What would you say that Harvard needs? I think that basically, what do they need to make sure that they do embrace Latinas going there?
So I hope that some of this has changed. It When I was there, it was 2007, so that was a number of years ago. But I would say that they could have done maybe a better job of identifying students who might have been at risk, who didn't have the same kind of support systems or yeah, I would say resources to make that transition, and especially in students who have to make such a large leap from where they are to where they're going to be. So for example, some of the difficulties that I came across were that, first of all, I didn't have an appropriate wardrobe for the cold, right? I grew up in Phoenix where it's
Mhm.
really hot. And so I had never even experienced that kind of cold. So I was very unprepared. Like I remember walking to my dining hall to get food because there was no way to prepare food in the dorms, and my feet being numb from the cold, wet snow. Like by the time I got to the dining hall, because I only had flats, like I didn't have any winter shoes, right? And so they did provide like a small stipend to buy yourself a winter coat, but like I didn't even know what kind of winter coat to buy, so I bought like the wrong kind of winter coat.
Mhm.
I noticed that there were a number of students who had connected prior to arriving at Fresh as freshmen. Like they had gone through some kind of summer program. And so when I set foot on campus, I didn't know anybody and I didn't have any connections. I didn't have any friends. And it was really difficult to make friends with people who I couldn't really relate to
Mhm.
or with. And so it was an extremely isolating experience. Now,
Mhm.
had Harvard invited me to maybe meet a cohort of students before I got there, I could have maybe felt a little bit more comfortable.
Did you have like a mentor or an advisor when you were transitioning from high school to Harvard?
I didn't. And I think that's one in retrospect, that was one of the most difficult things that I had in high school, a wonderful, like, support system of teachers who really knew me, right? And they were looking out for me like, "Hey, apply for this opportunity. I think you'd be great for this." My counselor was the one who encouraged me to apply. Like, I received an application in the mail, and I took it to her, and she said, "Absolutely," like, and she wrote the most fantastic letter of recommendation. I remember just crying when I read it. But when I was there, there was nobody. There was nobody. I had nobody, and of course, my family tried to help from afar, right? But they didn't have the resources, for example, to come visit me. I was going through a period where I was extremely homesick and just craving like the warmth of my culture and my family, right? And I was feeling so alone. And I just wanted somebody to come visit me, or I just wanted to go home for a weekend and having not having access to funds to buy myself a plane ticket or for my parents to be able to buy themselves a plane ticket to come visit me. I think those were some of the most difficult parts.
Yeah. Yeah, it is difficult. Definitely, you needed someone to guide you and let you know that, it's definitely cold in Boston. I'm in Michigan, so I know, yeah, so when you were at Harvard, though, what were you planning on? What was the career you were planning at that point when you started there? Because you actually went as a freshman, right?
Right, right, and so I feel like I was kinda lost in that time, and, I was actually majoring in archaeology, and so I thought I would do archaeology in pre-med, and so I don't feel like I had a great strategy, again, because I don't feel like I had a lot of guidance at that point of,
Mm,
like, and I would say even in high school, right, I had this idea that I wanted to be a doctor, yet I never took physics in high school, and nobody was kinda like, "Hey, you wanna be a doctor? You need to take physics." And so
mhm,
when I got to Harvard, they had this class, it was like biochemistry, and it was really advanced, and so I was also realized that my public school education didn't prepare me adequately for the rigor of that specific scientific class. And when it came to classes that were more like theoretical in nature, like I took a class on the history of the Cuban Revolution from somebody who lived under Fidel Castro. And so he
mhm.
had like really rich experiences to share with us. I was doing really well in those kinds of classes. But when it came to like math and science, even though I had taken the highest level of classes that I had at my high school, it the pace at which those science and math classes went at Harvard was just a lot different from what I was prepared with.
Yeah, they don't quite not all high schools prepare the STEM advanced to be prepared for college, and I think even students have to search for that program. I know my son went through that in high school. I didn't even know the program existed, and at ninth grade, he saw he went and applied for it, had to do an essay, and he got in, and that helped him tremendously.
Mhm.
And I think there were only 2 Hispanic, boys there, not even any girls, but um, if had he not seen that, and I think it's even something that for parents, you know, for high school Latinas, we are so busy, we don't know. I would go to the school and look for information because I went to a vocational school in high school, and that's what I was looking for. And when I saw that, I'm like, oh, well, I didn't know you signed up for that. So not all of them do that, but there needs to be more preparation, um, and more communication to our parents, to know that these opportunities are out there. Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Well, it sounds like a really great journey you've had. So at least, you've gone through so much and life changes too, and you kept going, which that's an important message to our Latina high school students that you don't ever give up. You keep pursuing it. And in all this experience, sounds like you had a lot of great skills that you've developed and you're continuing to develop. So, what advice would you give to a Latina high school student regarding, what they should do, or let's say they might be hesitant about pursuing it? I always often came across Latinas at colleges where I would speak, and they were thinking of social work and giving up on nursing or medicine or even going into STEM. So they just felt like they wouldn't be worthy of it. But you know, there's always a way. What would you advise a Latina high school student having gone through your journey, and maybe she's hesitant about pursuing something?
I think sometimes we think about this journey as it being for us, right? Like, I have to succeed. But a lot of our motivating factors are helping others. And I feel like that's very natural to the way that we're raised.
Mhm,
You do things for the benefit of others. And if it helps to think about it in that way, going into these fields is a way to help others because our voices are so underrepresented in so many of the spaces that I've entered since I left my very diverse community in high school where I was raised, and I've kind of gone out into the like real world, right, of your career. There are
mhm.
so few of us here, and
Yep.
I've had so many experiences where I am the only either person of color or woman at the table or in the room or in the conversation. And it makes me feel like we don't encourage our own community enough to prepare themselves to be in these spaces.
Mhm.
Um, and our voices are so needed because diverse perspectives make everything so much better. And so I would just really say that to continue for yourself as much as possible, but also continue knowing that you're doing something better for the community at large. Because a lot of important decisions are being made, right? In these
Mhm.
boardrooms, in these meetings where our voices aren't being represented. And so we need to bring that perspective.
That's excellent advice. I like that. Coming to that, you did a paper, a thesis on patient disparity. Tell us about that.
Yes, it was under my wonderful mentor, Maureen Campesino at ASU. And it was about racial and ethnic disparities in traumatic brain injury. And so I guess this is another piece of advice is that you don't have to abandon your interests for studying things about our community while you stay in other career paths. So one of the things that I was kind of tempted to do was maybe study like Chicano history or something, like to really connect with my roots more, because I feel like a lot of us need that, right? Growing up in this like um, Anglo-centric kind of educational system, we don't learn a lot about ourselves. And
Mhm.
so I almost did my thesis on something about my cultural heritage. But then I decided to mesh the two interests, which is something that I've kept practicing along my career, is finding a way to still connect to my culture while I'm doing something in healthcare. So this was a really meaningful kind of thesis for those reasons, that it combined my two interests. And it was a fun project. Like I just, like I said, really like homework, like research papers. And so I looked up everything that I could, all of the research that has been done, all of the different studies about this topic. It took me a long time to put together, but it was a lot of fun. And so I found out that there were, even controlling for several different factors, still differences in outcomes based on ethnicity and racial factors. And so not only, did I come to this conclusion, but then I also created some pamphlets and things that were in Spanish and English to take to community centers around Phoenix, that people could kind of read as they were in the waiting room to educate themselves about how to prevent traumatic brain injuries and what some of the most like common reasons for traumatic brain injury in our communities.
Wow, that's fantastic, Anna. That's wonderful that you did that. Yeah, it's definitely, we need more Latinas like you out there. So that's wonderful. Well, so much. Thank you so much, Anna, for taking the time to share your journey and inspiring a young Latinas that are out there, and they see you because, thanks to technology and media, this is one of the things that, we're growing and as we're working on building this mentor mentee app for getting more connectivity between Latinas like you and our high school Latinas. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Terry, and thank you for this platform that you've created. I'm sure it's an invaluable resource to many.
Thank you. Well, this concludes our episode on Ask the Latina. I hope you join us at the next one. Thank you.